Jack Sullivan, a retired Army veteran, never thought a simple drive home in the Blue Ridge Mountains would lead to a life-changing encounter with a dying lion. That one choice he made left his entire small town in shock. The sun had just dipped behind the jagged peaks of the Blue Ridge, leaving the forest in a thick, ghostly gray. Jack's old Ford F-150 rattled on the gravel road, the only sound for miles. He had spent the day at his favorite fishing hole, seeking the kind of peace only a veteran truly understands. But as he rounded the bend near Spirit Creek, his headlights hit something that made his heart stop. A massive golden shape was slumped across the road. Jack slammed on his brakes, the tires skidding. His dog Cooper, a loyal golden retriever, began to whimper in the passenger seat. Jack reached for his flashlight, his hands steady from years of service, but his mind was racing. It was a lion, a full-grown African lion, right here in the middle of Virginia. But this wasn't the king of the jungle. It was a skeleton draped in matted fur. As Jack stepped out, the beast let out a low, rattling growl that felt like a vibration in Jack's own chest. The lion tried to lift its heavy head, but its legs buckled, and it collapsed back into the dirt with a heavy, dusty thud. Its amber eyes locked onto Jack's. In that moment, Jack didn't see a predator. He saw a soul that had been broken by the world. The lion bared its yellowed teeth in a final, desperate warning, but its breath was shallow. Jack stood frozen. He was one jump away from those jaws, but he couldn't turn away. The silence of the woods felt like a trap. Jack took a long, slow breath, the kind he used to take before a mission. He retreated to his truck and grabbed his cooler. He didn't have much, just some beef jerky and a gallon of spring water. He spoke in a low, gravelly voice, the kind you use with a scared horse. "It's okay, big guy. I've been tired too. I'm not here to hurt you." He shredded the meat and tossed it near the lion's muzzle. The cat's nose twitched. It ate with a tragic, shaking hunger. When Jack poured water into a plastic bowl, the lion lapped it up, its tongue dry as sandpaper. Slowly, the fire of fear in those eyes began to dim. The lion let out a soft, huffing sound. It stood up, swaying like a ghost, and looked toward the dense brush. It took a few steps, stopped, and looked back at Jack. It was an invitation to enter the dark. But where was this beast leading him? And why did Jack feel like the true danger was only just beginning? You won't believe what was waiting for him at the end of that trail. Jack followed the lion into the thickening woods, his flashlight cutting through the mist. The smell hit him before he saw anything, the sour stench of waste, rotting hay, and old rusted metal. They broke through a wall of vines and Jack's breath hitched. Hidden in the valley sat a place the locals had whispered about for years but had long since forgotten. The Miller Roadside Zoo. It was a graveyard for the living. Under the flicker of Jack's light, the cages appeared like ribs of a dead giant. This wasn't a home, it was a prison. He saw a black bear swaying in a tiny circle, its mind gone from years of pacing. He saw two tigers huddling together on a cold concrete floor, their beautiful stripes covered in filth. The lion, whom Jack now called the General, led him to the back of the property. The heavy iron gate of the main enclosure was hanging off its hinges. The General had used his last bit of strength to break out. Inside, the cages were empty of food. The water troughs were dry and cracked. The owners had clearly packed up their money and vanished weeks ago, leaving these warriors of the wild to starve in the silence of the mountains. Jack felt a cold, hard anger rising in his throat. As a man who had sworn an oath to protect the weak, this was a slap in the face to everything he believed in. He realized then that the General hadn't escaped to save his own life. He had come to the road to find a witness. He had come to find a savior for those he left behind. Just then, a thin, haunting wail echoed from a wooden shed near the tiger cages. It sounded like a child in pain. The General nudged the shed door with his scarred muzzle and let out a soft, mournful moan. Jack reached for the latch, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew that once he opened this door, his quiet life would be over. Jack sat on his tailgate for a moment, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. He remembered how this town used to be. In the 70s, Miller's Zoo was the place every kid wanted to go. People had turned a blind eye as it fell into ruin, thinking the animals were just fine. Jack felt the sting of regret. He had driven past this turnoff 1,000 times. He picked up his old radio. He didn't call the authorities first. He called the people who knew how to get things done in the Blue Ridge. He called Sam, a retired vet. He called Miller, the sheriff. And he called Sarah, who ran the local feed store. "I've found them," Jack said, his voice thick. "And we're going to need everything you've got." But as the moon reached its peak, Jack found something inside that shed that would haunt his dreams forever. The general wasn't just a guide. He was a guardian of a secret that was nearly dead. Jack stepped into the shed, the door screaming on its rusted hinges. His flashlight beam danced over old crates and dusty tarps. In the far corner, tucked away under a pile of filthy raw, he saw a patch of brown fur. He stepped closer, expecting another exotic pet. But instead, he found something that belonged right here in Virginia. It was a mother deer, a doe. She was skeletal, her ribs pushing against her skin like knives. She was laying perfectly still. Beside her, tucked tightly against her cold flank, was a tiny fawn, only a few days old. The fawn was nudging its mother's nose, letting out those high, crying sounds Jack had heard earlier. Jack knelt in the dirt, his heart sinking. He reached out a hand and touched the doe's neck. She was cold. Her eyes were fixed on nothing. "I'm sorry, little one," Jack whispered to the fawn. "I'm too late." The general stood in the doorway, watching with a quiet, heavy dignity. The lion hadn't touched them. He had been protecting them. He had been the only thing keeping the mountain coyotes away from this shed for days. Jack was about to stand up when he felt a tiny, almost invisible movement. He looked back at the doe's chest. He waited 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Then a tiny, ragged gasp. Her lungs struggled to take in the air, but they moved. She wasn't dead. She was just at the very edge of the bridge. "She's alive!" Jack shouted, his voice echoing in the shed. "She's still here!" He went into combat mode. He ran to his truck and grabbed his emergency kit. He had electrolytes and a bottle of warm water. He knew he had to be careful. He began to drop the liquid into her mouth, one drop at a time, rubbing her throat to help her swallow. "Stay with me, girl," he pleaded. "The town is coming. Just give me 10 more minutes." The doe's eyes flickered. She looked at Jack with a deep, primal fear, but she didn't have the strength to run. Jack stayed there, kneeling in the muck, talking to her about the spring clover in the quiet woods. He told her about his dog, Cooper, and how they would look after her. He was fighting a war against death in a dusty shed, and for the first time in his life, the enemy was retreating. Outside, the general let out a roar that shook the very foundation of the zoo. It wasn't a roar of anger. It was a signal. From down the road, the lights appeared. 1 pair, then 5, then 10. The whole town was coming. The sirens of the sheriff's car mixed with the rumble of farm trucks. Jack looked at the doe, and she let out a soft breath, her ears twitching. She was staying. She had chosen to fight. Jack sat back, his clothes covered in dirt, and looked at the lion. "We held the line, General. We held the line." The next 4 hours were a whirlwind of movement. The quiet valley was suddenly flooded with light. Sarah from the feed store arrived with crates of fresh hay and high-quality grain. Dr. Sam, the vet, worked by the light of a dozen lanterns, moving from the tigers to the bears. The townspeople, people Jack had seen every Sunday at church, were standing in the mud, carrying buckets of water and clearing brush. There was no talk of money or politics. There was only the work. When they saw Jack and the general standing together by the shed, a hush fell over the crowd. It was a picture of a peace treaty between man and beast that no one could have imagined. But as the sun began to rise, the victory was cut short. The general, the one who had started it all, began to stagger. His mission was over, but his body was failing. The dawn was breaking in shades of pink and gold when a cry went up from the front of the zoo. "Jack, get over here! It's the lion!" Jack ran, his old knees aching. The general was laying in the tall grass near the entrance, his breathing coming in wet, heavy rasps. Dr. Sam was already there, his face pale. "His heart is failing, Jack. The stress, the starvation. It's too much. He's going into cardiac arrest." Jack fell to his knees beside the great cat. He pulled the general's massive head into his lap. "Not like this," Jack whispered, his voice breaking. "You're the hero here. You don't get to leave yet." The townspeople gathered in a wide circle, their heads bowed. The sheriff turned off his sirens. The only sound was the wind and the shallow, clicking breath of the lion. Suddenly, the general's body went limp. His eyes clouded over. Dr. Sam checked for a pulse and shook his head. "He's gone, Jack. I'm so sorry." But Jack Sullivan didn't know how to surrender. He remembered his training. He began to massage the lion's massive chest, pushing down with everything he had. "Come on, breathe," he yelled. He did it again and again. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the old veteran fought for the life of the predator. 1 minute passed. 2. Then a sound like a thunderclap. The general's body lurched. He let out a deep, hacking cough. His amber eyes snapped open, and he took a massive, gulping breath of the mountain air. The monitor Dr. Sam had hooked up began to beep, slowly, then steadily. He was back. A cheer went up from the people of the Blue Ridge that could have been heard 3 counties away. It was a miracle that defied every law of science. It was the general's final victory. The following months were a time of healing for the whole town. The owners of the zoo were found in a motel in Florida and brought back to face justice. The local kids started a general's fund to help pay for the animals' care. The mother doe and her fawn were released back into the woods behind Jack's house, and every morning Jack would see them grazing near his porch. But the general needed something more. He needed a place where he could be a king again. 1 year later, Jack Sullivan was standing on a dusty ridge in the heart of Texas. He had flown there with Dr. Sam to visit the wildlife sanctuary. He was wearing his old army cap, looking out over thousands of acres of golden grass that looked just like the African savanna. The sanctuary director pointed a finger toward a group of acacia trees. "There he is!" A lion stepped out from the shade. But it wasn't the skeleton Jack had found on the road. This was a magnificent beast. His mane was a thick, dark crown of gold that shimmered in the sun. His muscles were like coiled springs under a coat that looked like silk. He walked with a power that made the earth seem to tremble. He stopped 30 feet from the fence. He looked at Jack. There was no growl this time. There was no fear. The general walked right up to the fence. He let out a low, vibrating purr that Jack could feel in his own chest. The lion leaned his massive head against the wire and waited. Jack reached out and buried his fingers in that golden mane. The lion closed his eyes, leaning into the touch. In that moment, the entire world seemed to fall away. Jack felt a weight lift off his own soul, the weight of the wars he'd fought and the friends he'd lost. He realized that in saving the general, he had saved the part of himself he thought was gone forever. The lion let out a soft huff, turned, and trotted back to join his new pride. He was finally home. As Jack drove away from the sanctuary, watching the Texas sun set in the rearview mirror, he knew that some bonds are written in the stars. The story of the veteran and the lion became a part of the Blue Ridge folklore, a reminder that mercy is the strongest force on earth. Friends, if this story of hope and duty touched your soul today, please leave a comment below. We want to hear your thoughts on Jack's incredible choice. And if you're ready for another journey that proves the power of the human heart, click the video on your screen right now. There are so many more stories waiting to be told. We'll see you in the next one.